Saw you on NBC recently talking about how shame is more important than eating the right foods. Help me understand this. Again, tell me if I butcher this. So I think probably what I said, did a segment here recently on NBC, was that we were talking about the Better Movie, which bettermovie.com. If you haven't seen it, it's awesome. And we were talking about the importance of shame on optimizing one's lifestyle, and how the example I probably gave, because it's the example I frequently give, is if one were to eat something which is objectively not going to improve one's health, like let's say Mountain Dew and a bag of Cheetos, right? Like nobody thinks that that's going to objectively improve their health. That if one were to feel shame about that decision, that that feeling of shame is actually more harmful to one's health than the Mountain Dew and the Cheetos. So I'll unpack that a little bit more, but just to clarify, I'm definitely not saying to forget about sane eating. All we need to do is love ourselves, and then magically everything will work itself out. That some people have kind of criticized me for seemingly saying that, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, and what we communicate in the Better Movie, and what the evidence supports, the actual scientific evidence supports, is that sane eating is essential. It's absolutely critical. It's the basis on which our entire organization is based. But what we've learned, one of the biggest distinctions we've made over the past 10 years, is that having the information, sane eating, is essential. It's also not sufficient. So there's a concept in philosophy called, like, in order for something to, you need, it needs to be necessary and it needs to be sufficient. So is the information around sane eating necessary? Is it necessary to have that information to actualize our best lives? Yes, it is absolutely necessary to have that information. Is it sufficient just to have that information? The answer is no. And for example, we have to have the motivation. We have to have the motivation to eat sanely. We have to have the access to eat sanely. If you live in a food desert and there are no vegetables around, you could have the correct information, you could have the motivation, but you don't have the access, right? So sane information is essential. It is necessary, but it in and of itself will not get us to our optimal lives. Another critically important component is motivation, but motivation to me is actually one level above what we really need, and what the evidence really shows. What the evidence really shows is that motivation is a byproduct of self-love, and self-love is the opposite of shame. So I'm going to unpack all of this. Oh, and by the way, sometimes the reason we don't get to everyone's question is sometimes we get questions like this, which, to really do them justice, requires a little bit more explanation. So hopefully I don't bore you with this explanation, because it is critically important. All right, so we need sane information. That is essential, right? We also need the ability to act on that information, and to act on that information consistently, and to act on that information without a tremendous amount of stress, right? So the word most people would use is, I need to have motivation, but we need to look a level below that. Where does motivation come from, right? Where does that motivation doesn't just pop out of the air? And sometimes someone says, I'm going to hire a personal trainer. They're going to motivate me. Well, in that context, I would argue that you don't have motivation. You're actually hiring someone with the hopes that they will motivate you, right? The point of a personal trainer, as someone who was a personal trainer many 20 years, no, how old am I? Yeah, 20 years ago. Wow, 20 years ago I was a personal trainer. Didn't realize that until just now. Getting older, got some gray hairs in the beard here. Is essentially my primary job was to motivate people. They didn't have motivation, so they hired me to motivate them. To have our own motivation, we have found that comes from a deep sense of self-love and self-worth and meaning in one's life. Let me give you a concrete example of this. Often people find that they change their eating habits more easily when they discover they're pregnant. So obviously this applies specifically to women. So women often have the experience of feeling compelled to change the way they eat when they're pregnant because they know they are now responsible for a second life. So there is a sense of self-love, for love of their body, what their body contains, that level of self-love causes what would be known as intrinsic motivation. So they're not relying on a personal trainer, extrinsic, outside of them. They're looking inside themselves to find a motivation. And then if they have access to sane eating information, self-love leads to the motivation to then act on the information of eating sanely, right? So hopefully that all made sense. So why are we talking about shame? Why did I talk about shame in this interview? Why do we talk about shame so much in the Better Movie? Again, bettermovie.com. It's because shame is the opposite of self-love. If you are feeling shame, what that means, and shame is not the same as guilt. If you're feeling shame, that is a sense of, so the difference between shame and guilt is, let's say in the context of eating Mountain Dew, drinking Mountain Dew and eating Cheetos. If you felt guilty about doing that, that is, the thought would be, I made a bad choice. Oh, sorry, I would have rephrased that. My choice to drink Mountain Dew and to eat Cheetos will not help me achieve my goals. It was a non-productive choice. That's guilt. Guilt is the recognition that our actions are not consistent with something or someone we want to be. Shame is, I ate Cheetos and Mountain Dew, therefore I am a bad person. Not, my choice was not productive. That's guilt. I am bad. So shame is the belief that fundamentally we are broken or bad. And the reason that shame is the opposite then of self-love, right? Self-love is, I am intrinsically good. I have worth. I am capable. I am not broken. Shame is the opposite of that. Shame is, I am broken. And the reason this is so toxic is, if we fundamentally believe we're broken, what the hell are we supposed to do? Right? It's analogous to why HIV and AIDS are so debilitating of a disease, right? That disease attacks our immune system. If your immune system is compromised, how are you supposed to fight off a disease, right? So if a disease attacks the very thing that could get rid of it, you're in a bad place. So if we are experiencing shame, if we are caught in shame's trap, we believe that we are fundamentally broken. And if we believe we're fundamentally broken, how does this work? How can we possibly get better? Because the only person who could actually make us better is us. But if we're broken, we can't get better. And this is why we look outside of ourselves. We look to a personal trainer. We look to a guru. We look to a quick fix. Because on some level, if we believe we're fundamentally broken and we believe that we are not capable of change, we have to look outside ourselves, and that's where all the confusion and chaos happens. So you can see, with all of this said, right, eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew is going to have negative effects on our brain, our gut, our hormones, no question. But it's not going to rot our ability to make positive changes in the future, right? It's a moment in time that something that won't facilitate our goals happened. But it's not destroying our actual ability to make better choices in the future or to make more productive choices in the future. When we shame ourselves or when we're shamed by others, we are attacking the very thing that makes it possible for us to do better in the future. So clearly, that is far worse than the actual behavior or action, because we can change our behaviors and our actions. But if we believe that we can't change, we can't. And that's why self-love is so important. It is the opposite of shame, and that is why shame You could have all the sane information in the world, but if you fundamentally believe that you are not worth eating sanely, if you fundamentally believe that you're not capable of living sanely, if you don't love yourself, all the sane information in the world will not get you where you want to go.